What happens when the calmest voice in Hollywood walks into a studio built on confrontation, and the silence he leaves behind is louder than any argument? Before we dive in, pause for 1 second and subscribe to the Narration show. Hit that like button, and drop a comment as you watch, because moments like this don't happen often, and when they do, they change everything. The studio lights were already hot when Morgan Freeman took his seat, but something about that afternoon felt different. The view's familiar table gleamed under the glare, coffee mugs aligned like props waiting for a cue. Applause rose on instinct as Freeman walked in, measured steps, shoulders relaxed, that unmistakable gravity in his presence. The audience wasn't cheering a man so much as a lifetime of roles, wisdom, and a voice that had narrated history itself. He smiled politely, nodded once, and Saturday. The applause lingered longer than usual, as if no one wanted to be the first to stop clapping. Sunny Hostin leaned forward, cards in hand, eyes bright with the confidence of someone ready to ask the question that would shift the room. The opening minutes were smooth. Freeman spoke about legacy, storytelling, the responsibility of art. His voice flowed like warm honey, steady and reassuring, and the audience settled into their seats, comforted by its rhythm. Cameras drifted closer, catching the faint smile lines at the corners of his eyes. Then Sunny changed her tone. "Morgan," she said, carefully, "you've often talked about unity and understanding. But some critics say your views on race and responsibility dismiss lived experiences. Do you believe talking less about race actually helps? Or does it silence necessary conversations?" The room tightened. Even the air seemed to pull inward. Freeman didn't answer right away. He looked at Sunny, then briefly at the audience, as if weighing not just the question, but the moment itself. His fingers rested flat on the table. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, but something deeper stirred beneath it. "I believe," he said slowly, "that if you keep calling attention to something, you keep it alive. I've spent my life trying to see people as people, not categories." A few nods appeared in the crowd. A few stiffened shoulders followed. Sunny didn't nod. She leaned back slightly, lips pressed together, then leaned forward again. "But Morgan," she replied, sharper now, "for many people, not naming the problem feels like erasing it. Privilege allows silence. Not everyone has that luxury." The word privilege landed like a dropped plate. A murmur rippled through the audience. One woman gasped softly. Someone else whispered, "Oh wow." The camera cut to Freeman's face, and for the first time, his expression changed. Not anger, not defensiveness, but a quiet sadness, like a man hearing a familiar accusation dressed as concern. "I've never said silence," Freeman replied. "I've said responsibility. On all sides." Sunny's eyebrows lifted. But responsibility without acknowledgement can feel dismissive, especially from someone with your platform. That's when the silence started to grow. Freeman inhaled. You could see it in his chest. A long breath, steady, deliberate. When he spoke again, the warmth in his voice cooled, not into hostility, but into something firmer, heavier. "My platform," he said, "comes from decades of listening. From watching the same arguments circle endlessly while real change gets lost in noise. I won't perform outrage to make anyone comfortable." The audience froze. No applause. No laughter. Just stillness. Sunny opened her mouth, then closed it. For a split second, the practiced rhythm of the show faltered. The other hosts shifted in their seats, glancing between Freeman and Sunny, sensing the tension tightening like a wire pulled too far. "But isn't that," Sunny pressed, "a way of stepping away when others don't have the option?" Freeman turned fully toward her now. His gaze wasn't confrontational. It was piercing in its calm. "No," he said quietly. "It's a way of stepping forward without shouting." That was it. The moment cracked open. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was loaded. Cameras held their shots longer than usual. A producer offstage raised a hand, then lowered it, unsure whether to cut or let it breathe. The audience didn't know what to do. Clap. Boo. Stay quiet. So they stayed silent. Freeman looked down at the table, then back up, his eyes reflecting something unsaid. Not defeat. Not triumph. Just finality. "I think," he added softly, "we've confused volume with virtue." Sunny didn't respond immediately. Her cards were forgotten now, resting against the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was controlled, but the edge remained. "I respect your perspective," she said, though the words felt rehearsed in real time. "I just worry about who gets left unheard." Freeman nodded once. "So do I." And with that, he leaned back in his chair. The audience shifted, some exhaling as if they'd been holding their breath for minutes. A few tentative claps began, scattered and unsure, then faded away. No swell of applause came to rescue the moment. The silence had done its work. As the show moved toward a commercial break, the tension lingered like a low hum. The hosts exchanged quick glances. Sunny stared straight ahead, composed but unsettled. Freeman sat quietly, hands folded, the embodiment of calm after a storm he hadn't raised his voice to create. And in living rooms across the country, viewers leaned closer to their screens, sensing they had just witnessed something rare, not a shouting match, not a viral meltdown, but a collision of conviction so still, so heavy, it left an entire studio unsure how to speak next. The cameras came back from commercial, but the energy in the room hadn't reset. If anything, it had thickened. The applause sign flickered, urging the audience to respond, yet the clapping that followed was hesitant, uneven, like hands unsure whether noise was even appropriate anymore. Morgan Freeman acknowledged it with a slight nod, but he didn't smile this time. Sunny Hostin sat straighter, shoulders squared, her expression composed but alert, as if she knew the next exchange would define the entire segment. The co-host to Sunny's left tried to soften the moment, offering a gentle segue about Freeman's upcoming project, but the attempt dissolved almost instantly. The tension was too present, too unresolved. You could feel it in the way the audience leaned forward, in the way the studio lights seemed suddenly harsher. Sunny cleared her throat. "Morgan," she said, her voice measured now, "I want to come back to something you said about not performing outrage. For many watching, outrage isn't performance. It's survival." Freeman's eyes lifted slowly. He listened without interruption, the way a man listens when he's heard this before, many times, in many forms. When she finished, he didn't respond right away. The pause stretched, and in that pause, the room grew quieter than it had been all afternoon. "I understand that," he finally said. "Truly. But survival also requires building something that lasts. Anger can light a fire, but it can't be the house you live in." A low rippled through part of the audience. Another section remained still, arms crossed, brows furrowed. The divide was visible now, not just ideological but emotional. Sunny leaned in. "But when you say we should stop talking about race," she pressed, "people hear permission to ignore it." Freeman's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but resolve. "I never said stop talking," he replied. "I said stop defining each other by it. There's a difference. And that difference matters." The camera cut to Sunny, then back to Freeman, then briefly to the audience. One woman nodded vigorously. Another shook her head. The silence between responses became a character of its own, creeping into every space between words. "But doesn't refusing to center race," Sunny countered, "risk centering comfort instead?" That question hung in the air like a challenge. Freeman folded his hands, resting them on the table. His voice dropped even lower, forcing everyone to lean in. "Comfort," he said, "has never been my goal. Clarity has." A hush fell over the room. He continued, more personal now. "I grew up in a world that reminded me every day who it thought I was. I didn't escape that by shouting at it. I escaped it by becoming undeniable." The audience reacted instinctively, soft applause, a few murmurs of approval. But Sunny didn't retreat. "And what about those who don't have your opportunities?" she asked. "Your talent, your timing, your luck." For the first time, Freeman's expression hardened, not with defensiveness, but with something like grief. "Luck didn't raise me," he said. "Discipline did. Community did. And yes, timing plays a role in every life. But if we reduce people to victims forever, we rob them of agency." That was the moment the studio truly went silent. No applause. No murmurs. Just stillness so deep it felt intentional. Even the hosts stopped shifting in their seats. Sunny's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to respond immediately, but she didn't. Her gaze stayed locked on Freeman, searching his face for something. Hesitation, maybe. Doubt. She didn't find it. Instead, she exhaled, a controlled breath that betrayed a flicker of frustration. "I'm not calling anyone a victim," she said. "I'm asking for empathy in how we frame these conversations." Freeman nodded slowly. "And I'm asking for responsibility in how we prolong them." The exchange no longer felt like a debate. It felt like two philosophers colliding, each convinced the other was missing something essential. The audience sensed it. You could see it in their faces, some inspired, some unsettled, all captivated. One of the co-hosts tried again to step in, mentioning Freeman's long career, his contributions to cinema. Freeman smiled politely, but his eyes drifted back to Sunny. The conversation had found its center, and it wasn't letting go. Sunny glanced down at her notes, then back up. "Do you ever worry," she asked quietly, "that your words will be used by people who don't share your intentions?" Freeman considered this carefully. The pause felt heavier than any argument. "I worry," he said, "about being misunderstood. But I worry more about lying to be liked." A sharp intake of breath came from somewhere in the audience. The room shifted again. This wasn't television anymore. It felt like a private truth spoken in public. Sunny sat back, absorbing it, her expression unreadable. For a brief moment, no one spoke. The director let the silence run. The tension didn't break, it deepened. Viewers at home leaned closer. Social media timelines began to stir. Clips were already being cut, captions drafted before the segment had even ended. Morgan Freeman sat calmly at the table, a still figure in a restless room, while Sunny Hostin stared ahead, realizing that this wasn't a moment she could steer, it was one she could only sit with. And everyone watching knew, whatever came next would echo far beyond this studio. The silence didn't fade when the next question was supposed to arrive. It lingered, stretching beyond the boundaries of the show's usual rhythm. The producers had built the view on conversation, fast, overlapping, opinionated. But now, conversation felt fragile, like one wrong word might shatter something that couldn't be put back together. Sunny Hostin was the first to move. She adjusted her posture, a small but deliberate shift, as if grounding herself. Her expression softened, not in retreat, but in recalibration. "Morgan," she said, quieter now, "I want to understand where you're coming from, not just debate it." Freeman looked at her, really looked this time. His shoulders relaxed a fraction. "Then let's talk," he replied. "Not argue." The audience exhaled collectively, sensing the temperature drop just enough to breathe again. Sunny nodded. "When people hear you say, 'Stop talking about race,' many feel unseen. They feel like their pain is being minimized. How do you respond to that?" Freeman didn't rush. He leaned back slightly, eyes drifting upward for a moment, as if searching memory rather than opinion. "I respond by saying pain is real," he said. "But pain isn't the destination. It's the starting point." A murmur of agreement passed through the crowd, softer now, reflective rather than reactive. He continued, voice steady. "If all we do is point to the wound, we never heal it. Healing requires work, uncomfortable work, that doesn't always fit into sound bites." Sunny listened intently, her head tilted just slightly. "But sound bites are how messages spread," she countered. "They shape policy, public opinion. Silence, or simplification, can be dangerous." Freeman met her gaze. "So can distortion." That single word carried weight. The audience felt it. You could see it in the way a few people straightened in their seats, in the way whispers died before they could form. Sunny paused, then asked something different. "Do you feel pressure," she said, "to represent more than yourself when you speak?" Freeman smiled faintly, a sad, knowing smile. "Every day of my life." The room softened. "I didn't ask for that responsibility," he went on. "But I don't run from it either. I just refuse to let it turn me into a symbol instead of a human being." Applause broke out, real this time. Sustained, heartfelt. Freeman dipped his head in acknowledgement, but his eyes stayed on Sunny. When the clapping died down, she spoke again, her tone gentler. "And what do you want people to hear when you speak?" Freeman didn't hesitate. "That progress doesn't come from yelling at each other across lines we keep drawing. It comes from erasing the lines." A co-host shifted, clearly moved, but unsure how to follow that. The show had drifted far from its usual format, and no one wanted to be the one to pull it back too abruptly. Sunny folded her hands. "Some would say erasing lines ignores history." Freeman nodded. "History should be remembered, not reenacted." That landed like a final chord in a song you didn't realize was ending. The audience reacted in layers. Some clapped, others sat quietly, absorbing it. The divide was still there, but it had transformed. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about witnessing. Sunny looked down, then back up, eyes reflective. "I don't agree with everything you've said," she admitted. "But I hear you." Freeman inclined his head. "That's all I ask." Another pause. This one felt different. Less tense. More solemn. The director's voice crackled faintly through an earpiece somewhere off camera, urging a wrap. A co-host thanked Freeman for his honesty, his courage. Freeman responded with polite gratitude, but his demeanor remained composed, almost withdrawn, as if he had already stepped back from the moment. Sunny offered a small smile. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't defeated. It was thoughtful. As the segment neared its end, the audience stood, not all at once, but in waves. Some clapped enthusiastically. Others remained seated, contemplative. The camera pulled back, capturing the full table, the lights, the faces caught between admiration and unease. Morgan Freeman sat quietly amid it all, his presence steady, his words still echoing in the spaces they'd created. And everyone watching knew the conversation wasn't over. It had just moved somewhere deeper, somewhere that wouldn't be confined to a single episode, or even a single voice. The real reaction was waiting just beyond the studio doors. The applause continued as the cameras rolled their final seconds, but it felt distant now, like an echo from another room. When the red light blinked off and the show officially cut, the energy didn't release the way it usually did. No laughter, no casual chatter, just a quiet, unsettled stillness that lingered around the table. Morgan Freeman rose from his chair with the same calm he'd carried all afternoon. He shook hands with the hosts politely, offering a soft thank you. But his eyes betrayed exhaustion, not physical, but emotional. The kind that comes from speaking truths you know will be dissected, twisted, and debated long after you leave the room. Sunny Hostin remained seated for a moment after everyone else stood. She watched Freeman walk away, her expression thoughtful, conflicted. This hadn't gone the way she expected. There had been no sharp retort to go viral, no triumphant closing line. Instead, there was something far more difficult to process. Silence. Backstage, producers whispered urgently. Phones were already buzzing. Assistants refreshed social feeds, eyes widening as clips began spreading in real time. One short video, Freeman saying, "I worry more about lying to be liked," was already climbing into trending territory. Another captured the long pause after history should be remembered, not reenacted. Viewers weren't arguing yet. They were listening. In the audience, people exited slowly, conversations hushed. Some shook their heads in disagreement. Others nodded, still replaying the exchange in their minds. A woman wiped at her eyes, not because she'd been angered, but because she felt seen in an unexpected way. A man whispered, "I didn't expect that," as if surprise itself needed a voice. By the time Freeman reached his car, the internet had erupted. Headlines rolled in within minutes. Morgan Freeman stuns the view with quiet power. Sunny Hostin and Morgan Freeman clash, but no one wins. Comment sections split down the middle. Some praised Freeman's composure, calling his words wise, overdue, timeless. Others accused him of being out of touch, of misunderstanding modern realities. And right in the center were those who didn't know what to think, but knew they'd felt something. Sunny Hostin broke her silence later that evening with a carefully worded post. She didn't apologize. She didn't escalate. She wrote about the importance of hard conversations, about disagreement without disrespect. It was measured, thoughtful, and beneath it, thousands of comments argued, agreed, challenged, and reflected. Morgan Freeman said nothing. That silence spoke louder than any follow-up interview ever could. Days later, clips from the show were still circulating. Reaction videos filled YouTube. Commentators slowed the footage down, analyzing every pause, every look, every breath. But what lingered most wasn't what was said, it was what wasn't. The restraint, the refusal to perform, the calm that unsettled a space built for noise. People didn't remember shouting. They remembered stillness. And that's what made the moment unforgettable. Now, the question isn't who was right or wrong, it's what you felt watching it unfold. Did Morgan Freeman's quiet conviction move you? Did Sunny Hostin's challenge resonate with you? Or did the silence between them say more than either ever could? Tell us what you think in the comments below. This conversation doesn't end here. It continues with you. And if you want more explosive, cinematic, emotionally charged stories like this, make sure you subscribe to the Narration show right now. Like the video, share it with someone who loves deep, dramatic moments, and stay tuned, because the next story might leave the world silent all over again.